Okay, I'm going to have that up really fast. I'll drop the links like I always do. Okay. All right, there's the link. Dropped it into the general chat. Um, yes, Matt, he does. He does record and he does post every class to YouTube. That information, by the way, is also in the syllabus, complete with links to my YouTube channel. And of course, that link I just dropped on there is also a link to the YouTube channel. It's on my YouTube channel. So you can go there as well and get it. All right, I'm dropping the link. Oh, and the other thing, again, as a reminder, I also dropped the link just now into the calendar. So if you go, let me blow that up. If you go to the calendar on Canvas, right, there are links right there for all the lectures. And as we go, I just drop them in. Okay. So just remember that that is also a thing. Okay, let me double check. Let me see. Backing up on the questions. Yeah. So the other question, by the way, reminder for some of the new folks, I think there's a few late ads. If you would please, this is like to Aluka, who else is in there? It's new. Trent's okay. If you could change your nickname to the first name by which you would like to be referred. You can put your whole name, totally fine, and I won't refer to you as anything but the first name. That's kind of that's my FERPA commitment to you. So only first names, go out on YouTube. Uh, Other real quick. Okay, so yeah, so Aluka, if you can't make it for class, or you hit all of it, or even just your schedule works weird, or you want to go back to review some particular part that I talked about, just go to my YouTube channel. Okay. And let me see, YouTube, everything on YouTube. And again, hit the dadgum syllabus. It's right there. Front of the syllabus, top of the syllabus. Okay. The Rush song down that I played was YYZ. Oh, there it is. Alchie yeah. That's such a great tune, man. Such a great tune. Okay, Trent asked this question. I think it's a good one. Uh, in general, should we do one module per week? Week 2, for example, corresponds to module 2. And that's sort of like ish. The way we do this thing, let me drop that schedule on you again. The way we do this is it's a little bit loose. It's not like crazy precise, okay, on the what happens when. What you should do more than anything is keep up, okay? Let me say this one more time. I said it last week. You should, when we start in on a module, grab the homework, okay? The homework's on Canvas. Pull the homework down and pull the homework and use it like bingo. Read it, look at the questions. Some of it you might even, especially module 1, you may already understand. When it talks about ambiguity, for example, in natural language and things like that, you may already have, some ideas. Then play bingo. When I get to that part in lecture where I talk about it, then, um, then, sorry, I'm got distracted. But when you get to that part that I'm talking about it, then just make a note, like what the time signature Wait, I'm live now. Oh, you know what? Sorry. Hold tight, hold tight. I did it dumb. It's live on YouTube right now, but sorry, man. Just a second. There we go. My bad. Totally my bad. When that happens, let me know, please. Also, yeah, like you did. So Blake did. Yeah, as soon as you know what I mean? As soon as we've got any weird problems, let me know right away. So you're right, Trent. I was not live. I apologize. Okay, so I just want to repeat now, since for those of you not on YouTube, which is most of you, this is right there, the lecture videos, okay? Links to the lecture videos on my YouTube channel. A link to my YouTube channel right there. This is on the class schedule. If I go to home, the class schedule is right there, okay? And also, if you read the bloody syllabus, number 2 right there, class will also be streamed live to my YouTube channel here. Link. Okay, so step number 1, read the syllabus. Look at the syllabus. And when you're here in this home, if you click right there, full class schedule is here. Boom, there we go. We're going to actually finish up module 1 today. So really module 2 is going to start on Thursday. Okay, so what I want you to do is get the homework, print it out, do whatever you need to do, have it there on your screen, extra monitor, whatever, and use it like bingo. Okay, when I talk about it, make a mark about, like where it was, about what time, in class or whatever. And then you can, come back and double check stuff. Okay. So Trent, the question is, what you want to do is be ready. So as I'm talking about it, I'm going to finish module 1 today. So today you should finish homework 1, like right after class, or even while class is going if it's not too distracting. Okay. You with me? And then get that thing done. And then later on today, when you do the homework, when you submit the homeworks on Canvas, we'll mark them complete if they are in fact complete. They don't have to be right, but they have to be complete. We'll mark them. As soon as we mark it complete, you are green lighted to take the exam. So what you ought to do is, we finish a module today, you're taking that exam tonight. Okay, if you keep up with that, I'll basically guarantee that you're going to pull a B or better if you do that. Okay, in this class, even if it feels like crazy, mysterious, and weird, I promise the fluency will drop in if you do that. Okay, remember, if you're bailing, you're failing. Bail equals fail. That is basically the only way to fail this class, is to bail. That's my experience doing this now for 3 years. Since I joined faculty here at UVU. Okay. Other quick questions. So, and then the other thing we're going to do is, as soon as we finish a module, like today, we'll finish this module, and it will show as due, meaning it'll like turn to a 0 on Canvas 48 hours later. So Thursday, module 1 will show as due on Thursday. We'll change the deadline from the last day of the semester to Thursday. And that allows us flexibility to move the deadlines to right after we finish a module. You've always got 48 hours. Now, you have technically as long as you want, but we put the 48 hours there as a nudge. You can manage it if you want to blow past it, but just understand that if you blow past it, you know, whatever, you're Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, going over the cliff in the quarry. You're Thelma and Louise. I don't know what you are, but you're bad. It's bad shape. You're in bad shape. You're not bad, but you're in bad shape. Okay, everybody with me on this? Goal is you finish the module within 2 days of when I finish talking about it. And you're doing the module while I'm talking about it. You do that, you will succeed. I promise you, if you do that, you'll succeed. Okay. All right, got the live thing going, got that fixed. Okay. Yeah, okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm just double checking back on the on the comments that I may have missed? All right, and I'm blowing past all the anime things because it's something, quite frankly, that I've never really understood. Okay, just had to scan that. But anyway, it's all good. It's all good. I also, by the way, really like the fact that with the general chat channel, there's a point where the noise can be too much, and it gets in the way of people who are trying to, in the middle of class, trying to use the class, use the chat channel, for questions about what we're talking about. But on the other hand, I really dig the idea and the reality of you getting to know each other, and connecting, making friends. I mean, we're hella isolated right now, pretty bad still. So I really, really like I'm not, me, I'm not a stickler on these kinds of things. Okay, that's any other housekeeping. I think there's not. We always, by the way, can I just say one other thing? Of course I can. It's my bloody class. I just want to say that one of the things that I mentioned last week, one of the comments is nagging me a little bit, as you can tell. It's like, he didn't start class, so it's now, 11:42. We're 12 minutes late. We're not late. We're answering questions. When I start talking about, there were literally students, I'll just say it again, last semester that were, belly aching about, well, class didn't start for 15 minutes. And then they were really clueless about like strategy for how to succeed on the project. Well, guess what I talked about the strategy for how to succeed on the project? Oh gosh, I don't know. How about in the first 15 minutes? This kind of coaching and this kind of stuff, it's why I do it. Okay. So just understand why I'm doing that. It doesn't all fit in a slide, and it doesn't all look like, fact that you have to memorize. I know you're all very eager to memorize the facts, but anyway, all right, let's do this thing. So here's where we were, right? We did the abstraction lady from Google, who wears, I don't even know what that is, a sacred amulet around her neck. But anyway, we did that one and then decided we were going to move on from here. So we are gonna wrap up module one now, um, and then we'll be on to module two on Thursday. Okay, here we go. Next item. It's the last item. We were in this section, by the way, called two recurring themes, right? And one was abstraction, which we talked a lot about, and then the lady, and then the other one is hardware and software independence. And that's really just this last slide of this little section. Okay. And I just want to say, if you're reading the book, I feel like the authors overstate the hardware software interdependence. There is in computer systems, there's no question that there is interdependence between the hardware and the software. They have to play together. And there's, operating systems that play that direct connection role between applications which sit on the OS and the OS which kind of sits on the hardware really and uses hardware hooks to communicate. Okay, um, and so let me see. All right, um, but the reality is that increasingly it's less of an issue. Okay, that there's a lot of things about, like, for example, the book, even the third edition, which just came out, but the second edition was a lot older, didn't really matter that much because the fundamentals of hardware, the fundamentals of transistors, this is way overstatement from somebody who is, more or less ignorant at the lowest levels where the physics comes into play. It's not my wheelhouse. Um, but understanding how it all fits together, how it works, starting at that point, is very much. But to say that the idea, the concept of hardware, the concept of transistors, the implementations is it's an ongoing crazy art form. You know what I mean? That I obviously have a lot of respect for. Uh, I don't know if that's obvious or not, but I do. And as a consequence, there are a lot of things changing, but the fundamentals don't change that much. But this is one that actually has changed. And the reason is because look at Java, right? Java was created in conjunction with the idea of a Java virtual machine. The JVM, as we call it, is an application that runs on the operating system, but it's a virtual machine. So when you write code in Java, the interpreter slash compiler translates that code into Java bytecode, which essentially is assembly language for the Java virtual machine. Okay, so the Java virtual machine gives you that interface where when you write Java code, you actually create bytecode, which is assembly language, but it only talks to the virtual machine, which is essentially an application that sits on top of the operating system, which talks to the real machine. Okay, so abstraction, right? Different. That's like go higher and then go lower. It's a little funky, but that's example of Java browser. The browser starts in the early 90s, and original web pages. The browser was just kind of this app, but over time, an app that you could drop HTML files, kind of static stuff into. With JavaScript and with, active, various kinds of active sort of, components that you could drop into a page, uh, the idea of a browser began to be more and more powerful. And eventually you got to the point where you could write applications to a browser, right? So now you're writing browser apps. Okay, so you're writing your apps, and the apps are being loaded into the browser, which is an application that sits on the operating system. So what I'm really trying to say, and there's a lot more interpreted languages and declarative languages, which we deal with a lot in 4450. Um, but the point just being that over time, there has been an absolute shift up in the level of abstraction at which we operate. Okay. Um, that's true of most technology, right? You think about, I mean, when you were driving, what did we have? We had a 1959 Ford pickup truck when I was a kid. Um, and, that thing, you'd pop that big hood and there was almost nothing inside of it. And you kind of had to be capable of maintaining it because it didn't run that reliably for that long. So you kind of, in the earliest days of automobiles, you had to have some savvy or it was dicey to even drive them because they were going to break. Similarly, earliest days of running computers, you had to have some savvy or you couldn't, it was going to die on you. So, just saying that over time, you now get this fairly small car, you open the hood and it's just wall to wall stuff and you don't even dare touch it, right? But back in the day, when I'm 15, we're tearing into the engine because you had to be able to do that because that was kind of the world back in the 1800s when I was 15. Um, do I think, Trent asks, this is a really good question, Trent. Do I think we're going to eventually migrate toward such a high level of abstraction where programming languages are like natural language? I truly don't think so. And it actually relates to one of the questions in the homework one. Boom, got him. Um, it's in homework one. The question is, it really has to do with ambiguity, which we really haven't talked about yet. But ambiguity has to do with the fact that natural language is by its nature horribly ambiguous. And software and technology, the implementation of systems cannot be ambiguous. You can't have something that kind of means one thing one time and then sort of means a different thing another time. You know what I mean? And English is probably, I'm going to guess, I speak a few languages, but um, I think that English is the most ambiguous natural language. I think so. Um, it certainly has the most synonyms. Synonyms are a huge issue in English, right? And the reason is because we have this notorious, um, right? So Elijah mentioned context is huge, right? Like, what do you mean within what right? What's the classic thing? Oh, did you actually say that, Senator? Yes, I did, but it was taken out of context. And you know that that's absolutely true. A, that there is this idea of context, and B, that if you're taken out of context, it can be horribly unfair. You know what I mean? If you take your words that, in other words, meaning is really fluid. And the problem is, the problem is that you don't want a compiler to have to guess your mood or your context. It's a little bit more like math, really, and that's why computer science flowed out of math more than anything, more than any other field. I think CS is derived from mathematics. But right, what is mathematics? What is an equation? Isn't it really just kind of a program? You know what I mean? You take a look at like, y equals mx plus b. Isn't that the equation for a line? Or, the quadratic equation. And some of you are like the meme, right? You're like the meme. You're like, I don't remember the quadratic. How about the Pythagorean theorem? What is the Pythagorean theorem but a declarative program that's disambiguated, right? Which basically just says that if there's a right triangle, if there is a right triangle, then these two sides that are adjacent to the right triangle, if you square each of these and add them together and take the square root, that has to be the length of the diagonal. It's a program. It's a program. And so really math can be viewed a lot really as just programming, but it has to be unambiguous. You know what I mean? It can't depend upon Pythagoras's mood of the day. Okay. Um, anyway, yeah, natural language. We're going to talk more about it here in just a bit, but it's really interesting. If something is tight, is that good or bad? If you're down with something, but we used to be up with things too. You could be up and down, and it meant the same thing. You know what I mean? You could be hot and cool and mean the same thing, or not. You know what I mean? Right? I mean, really, something's dope. Not literally. I hope. I mean, just whatever. Just pick, especially slang. But the problem is, by the time you take, here's the deal. Somebody mentioned earlier that he thought that maybe Python was close. Um, where is it? Where is it? Bryce said, I feel like Python's really close. I don't disagree with that. Okay. And I also don't disagree with Matthew that English is a bit of a Frankenstein language. I love English. I love English because of the power of expression. But English is actually, it's like a Ferrari, and driving it really, really well is a skill. But it's like so much horsepower under the hood. Even metaphors like so much horsepower under the hood. Um, yeah, yeah. But so the deal is, um, what I wanted to say about this last part, Matthew called bingo. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, no, so right. What Bryce was saying and kind of clarifying, we took him out of context earlier. Not sure you can get closer to it than Python. Did I have a voice comment, or maybe just an open mic for a sec? No, right? I mean, but what's interesting is when Grace Hopper drove the creation of Cobalt in the 50s, the goal was exactly that. The goal of COBOL was to make natural language, to make a language, a programming language that looked like natural language. So you could say things like, I don't even know, right? I never programmed in COBOL, but like, whatever. Get this from here, right? But don't we even do that with things like SQL, right? Select this thing, fill in blanks, from, name the table, right? Where, state the condition, right? We do things like that. The problem is you can't use a synonym of where, you have to say where. You know what I mean? So it really is never going to be natural language, but we always do, to the extent possible, attempt to use words that make some sense. For, to me, is not super intuitive as a keyword. There was also do while loops and repeat until loops, which I think are they're structures that are available to us. But that to me, the language makes more sense. Okay, I think you got the idea. All right, so let's talk about computer systems, and we will actually come back a little bit to the ambiguity. But I think computer system. What is a computer system? This is not a lot of slides here. Okay, I just want to bounce a couple things off of you. For some of you are kind of like lifetime computer nerds, uh, just been doing it for a long time, whatever. Either you just got into it on your own, or maybe one of your parents or an older sibling or somebody was into technology, or you had computers in the home or whatever. Um, you know, Whatever. Some of you just had this opportunity from a pretty early age, but there's a good cross section who, before you took 1400, you didn't know jack about any of this crap, right? Back to English. You can know Jack, but you can't know Jill. That seems sexist, right? But that's the expression. Um, Jill never. Well, maybe it's. I don't know. Jill never gets impugned either. Jack certainly does. Anyway, so what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that some of you never really got anywhere deep into computers until you had CS 1400, right? So you don't have a long history. So some of this is also, just understand, if you're somebody that for whom this is kind of native, just be a little patient while we, bring everybody up to speed, because not everybody, cut their teeth, in their diapers doing this stuff. So here's some terms. When we talk about a computer, I don't even know why I felt inclined to use this picture of a completely burned out, rusted, melted CPU, but that is a melted CPU. Um, the computer is really the processor, okay, which we sometimes call the CPU or the central processing unit, right? But we call it a CPU. Um, and this is one of those things where the terms get kind of munged, unfortunately. But the fundamental idea of a computer is that chip. Okay. So is this a computer? Yes. This is my smartphone. You know, is it a computer? Yeah. I've got a Bose speaker here. Is that a computer? Sure. Now, there's also a difference between something computer, like I got a printer right here. I'm just thinking about things that have a processor in them, right? I got my headphones are computers, right? There's a difference between the notion of a computer, because there's a chip somewhere in there that's a processor doing all the magic, and a difference between that and what we call a general purpose computer. My laptop, my phone, these are general purpose computers. My Bose speaker, not a general purpose computer. Okay. When we talk about a computer system, we usually lump in all the other crap, the monitor, the keyboard, stuff like that, and we throw them together. Like, you ever seen a tower PC referred to as, like, that's the CPU? Ever you've seen this, right? People will refer to that as the CPU, as opposed to the monitor, the keyboard. But it really isn't. It's not just the CPU is really just that chip. That's the CPU, and all the other. There's a bunch of other stuff inside the box that makes the CPU run. Different kinds of other stuff, I/O devices, stuff that's built in, power supply, a bunch of other things that aren't really a CPU. That's all I wanted to say about that. Okay, next thing. Let's talk about, these are just kind of small ideas coming kind of fast, okay? Because we got to get to discrete versus analog, which is a really important idea. So what we're going to talk about now is universal computational devices. That sounds really like intimidating and scary. Um, all it's really trying to say is that we can conceptualize computing systems as black boxes. That's really all this is trying to say. And it turns out as we go all the way back down to circuits, fundamental circuits and transistors, and build our way back up, we're going to get to a point where we can take a few circuits and kind of like just draw a box. Just, on the board, it's not going to have a box around it. We can draw a box around it and treat it like a unit so that we have inputs coming into it and outputs coming out of it. We can hook those together and draw a box around that. This apparently is my box. I don't know what that is. And then that could be, treated as like an adder or memory or some other thing. We can take those boxes, connect wires and stuff to them, draw a box around that
Yeah.
and say that's the CPU. See what I mean?
What?
Hot mic.
You should, but yeah.
Hang on, let's find out who the offender is.
Okay. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Hot mic.
Did you eat?
I did.
Okay.
Who is it?
Okay.
Who's the offender? We got to call him out. Haste. Haste. I think you got a hot mic. Bryce, maybe you. Those are the only two non-muted mics right now. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking with my brother.
Now you were talking to me, sir. You just didn't know it. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Um, all is forgiven. It's part of the dynamic. It's part of the dynamic. Uh, no blood, no foul, right? That's fundamental rule of pickup basketball. Okay, let's talk about this. Universal computing devices. Okay. Now, before we get over to this, actually, I'm going to back it up. I'm going to go over here first. And I want to maybe flip these. I want to flip these. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to flip those slides. Um, Turing machines. So Alan Turing. So what was the movie? The Imitation Game? That was it, right? Starring Benedict Cumberbatch as Alan Turing.
Yes.
Uh, that guy's a really great actor, and Alan Turing was a freaking absurd intellect. I mean, he was just amazing, amazing intellect. That's a great movie, by the way. It's not historically, mathematically, computer science-ishly perfectly accurate. So it's a bit of dramatization for the sake of, make a story that wasn't quite accurate. Which I don't know. I think there's enough, if done right, I think that there's enough magic to the way things really happened. You know what I mean? Without having to especially when it's historical and especially when it's something as important a figure as Alan Turing and as important an accomplishment as cracking the Enigma, um, which arguably turned the tide in World War II. Not to say, I don't know. We don't know how it would have ended, right? Um, anyway, Turing was really often credited as the father of theoretical computer science. There were other theoreticians at the time, Church and Kleene and von Neumann, and there were a bunch of people back, who were theoreticians, that were mostly mathematicians where they came from. But Turing conceptualized a universal computing machine, which became known as a Turing machine. I'm not diving in super deep to this, okay? But the idea was, and you're going to get into this when you get to finite state automata, whichever class, I don't know which class we do where that shows up. Discrete structures, maybe, not really sure. But finite state automata, you get into this idea of a Turing machine, which Turing conceptualized. There was not a real machine, unlike, say, Babbage's difference engine. It was not from the 1800s. It was not an actual machine. It was a conceptual mathematical model. Okay, but it has been shown theoretically to be capable of computing anything computable by a modern computer. Doesn't mean as fast, you know, by any stretch. Doesn't mean as efficiently, doesn't, but theoretically, it can do any computation that a modern computer can do. That's pretty remarkable when you consider that was almost 100 years ago, and it was purely a mathematical exercise. That's kind of remarkable. But again, Turing, amazing intellect. And I do want to say that Turing's description, sorry, the book's description of Turing machines, I find kind of weak, really, really weak. So just don't put any stock deeply in that. But the other thing, another thing that Turing did was kind of conceptualize the idea, and the Turing machine was really a way of doing this, um, of creating a black box so that there were simply inputs coming into the black box. The behavior of the black box was hidden, right? Black box because you can't see in it, right? And then output's going to pop back out. And that was really the whole idea. And there is a homework assignment where what you need to do it is really kind of given to you, but the TAs can also help when it comes to those homework assignments. If you would, and it asks you to say like, do a little box, draw some boxes. You're given these boxes which perform like addition and multiplication. So, you know, draw, like, for example, I'm going to give you one example because I think that I've always historically lectured on this a little bit too weak. But if I have, for example, a black box that just is called plus, and imagine that it just takes two inputs. So it's a binary operator, and it produces one output, right? So inputs coming in here and outputs going there. Then if I say up top is A and B and down below is C, you with me here? All I'm really saying there is that there exists this magic black box function that if I give it an A and I give it a B, whatever they are, or an A and a B, it'll add them together and it'll pop it out. We'll call that C. And if you did this in pure math, you would say it this way, okay? And what it really is just trying to do is get you, sorry, pen in my hand. It's just trying to get you to draw a connection between structures that look like this and mathematical equations that you're quite familiar with that look like this, okay? There's a connection between these two. That's really what it's trying to get you to do, because this is the way you think about it when you're thinking about circuits. And this is the way you're thinking about it when you're thinking about it in your algebra class. Does that make sense? And that really is the idea that we want to try to take away from this thing. And there is an example, there's some questions. So more bingo time. There are questions that relate directly to this idea. And then one other thing to keep in mind, there are questions like that also on the exam. And when you get into the exam, because of Canvas and Proctorio and all the dumb, one of the things we do is we actually do like a supplement. We call it a supplemental exam one question, where it's in the assignments, just like there's no Proctorio. You do the things that are there and you take a picture of it and you upload it. Okay. It's just a lot easier than trying to write with words and describe, you know. All right. So is it only Josh with audio, or is anybody else? Yeah, just you, man. Sorry. Let me see. Okay, what was the paper? Hang on a second. Hang on. Sorry, I went back. I looked back at the Benedict Cumberbatch, Mr. Cucumber. Okay. By the way, is that paper? So Elijah, is that paper the one that makes the assertion that magic is Turing complete? Is that what that is referring to? Awesome. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to have to clearly go scout that out, which I just, all right, I just clicked on the link. Magic, the Gathering is Turing complete. Way too much time on their hands, but awesome. Okay, so that's the Turing, that's just trying to get you to think about that kind of stuff, okay? Now, when we go back here, we got to talk about analog versus digital systems, okay? This is really important, okay? It's really, really important. It is, in many respects, it's funny. Let me see. What are we doing? We're doing great on time, right? Yeah. One of the things about analog versus digital, uh, analog, which is related to continuous, and digital, which is related to discrete. You're going to touch it again, kind of here and there, but and it isn't like something like, oh, you're in module 8 and you never quite understood what analog was, so now you're screwed. It's not like that. It kind of shows up here, and then it's a point of literacy for the rest of your career. And if you really don't understand it for the rest of your career, you're going to feel like a doof. So this is like doof proofing, okay? Which is not the same as douche proofing, which is that's another order of difficulty, which I'm not even, it's above my pay grade. But doof proofing, absolutely. And so here's what we're going to try to talk about. So number one, what I want you to first get your head around is that analog relates to continuous and digital relates to discrete, okay? We can use them really as synonyms if we feel like it, okay? We can treat continuous and analog as, let me see. All right. We can treat the terms analog and continuous as roughly equivalent, and we can treat the terms digital and discrete as roughly equivalent. Okay, so here we go. The idea behind analog is that these are things that are continuous by their nature. They are continuous. So what do I mean by that? A math example would be like the real numbers. And the real numbers, if you recall, include all the fractions. They include all the integers. The integers are like 0, 1, -1, 2, right? They are numbers that have no fractions. 73, as long as it's like, you know, 0.0. In other words, there's nothing after that. It's just like 73. And in languages like Python, if you say 13.0, it'll say, oh, you mean a real number. That's how it disambiguates. And if you say just 13, no period, it'll say, oh, yeah, that's an integer. Why is that important? A number of reasons why that's important. But on the number line, there are an infinite number of real numbers between any two integers, right? Between 0 and 1, there are an infinite number. There is no space in there where there does not exist a real number, okay? What's the proof? Well, you could say go half the distance, right? Go half the distance, now go half the distance again, half the distance again, then we call this an infinite series, right? But if I take from 0 to 1, half the distance is a half, right? Half the distance again, 3/4. Half the distance again, 7/8. Half the distance again, 15/16. Half the distance again, 31/32. Half the distance again, 63/64. I mean, the game never stops. The game can never stop. Half the distance game never stops. Another way would be to say like, okay, 0.1, I got 0, okay, I got 0.1, 0.01, right? Shove a 0 up in the front. 0.01, which is a hundredth, right? 0.1 is a tenth, a hundredth. Now you're just dividing by 10 every time. Now I got a hundredth. 0.001, a thousandth. 0.0001, a 10,000th. A 100,000th, a millionth, a 10 millionth, a 100 millionth, right? 0.0000001, point, whatever that was, add another 0. It never stops. So the measure, if you were to try to measure something with real numbers and you had the capacity to perfectly measure it, it would be a really long number, effectively infinite, to get actually precise. The odds that it just happens to fall out to be like, oh, you're 6'2". Okay, guess what? Nobody in the world I'm 6'2". Nobody in the world is 6'2". They're maybe over 6 feet. They might be over 6'1". They might be over 6'2". I'm actually a little under 6'2", but I round it, right? They are not 5'12". Okay, are you with me on this? Right? What's the exact time of day? At a given instant in time, how many seconds have passed of the day? Well, I could say, where are we at right now? I can say it's 12:17, but it's not. It was during an infinitely small instance in time. It was, in fact, now it just says 12:18. It was at an infinitely small point in time. It was 12:18. But the time it took to be 12:18 was literally infinitely small. And now there is some number. And even if I could freeze the moment and take a picture so that it grabbed it in the moment, it's all continuous. Okay? Time is continuous. Even if I took a picture, I'd be subject to the time of the shutter speed. The amount of time of the exposure would create a window of time and not even an instant in time. Okay? So the easiest way, now in contrast, digital or discrete, the digital comes from digits, which is another way of saying fingers. Okay? The French say doigt, and that's D-O-I-G-T. The roots are in there. In English, the G, it's like, why digits? Well, the G is actually in French, in doigt. You don't say it, but it's in there like a etymological clue, right? And then the other Latin-based languages, right? Dito in Italian, and what is it? Dedo? Dedo in Spanish and Portuguese, right? But it all relates to this. So the notion of those all mean fingers. Okay, and in some instances toes, right? The digits, by the way, your toes are digits, as are your fingers. Okay, so why? So where do we get digital from fingers? Well, how many fingers do I have? 5. It's integers. We don't say, well, my hands are a little bigger than average and my fingers a little longer than average. So that's not 1.725538999 average, standard finger units. They're just fingers, buckets. That's a finger. Thumb is a finger. That's a finger. That's a finger. That's a finger. This is the finger. Very important finger, because it's there are 5 fingers, but there's only one, the finger. But they're discrete. They are buckets. They're integers, really. It's like taking, but if I look at something like, well, where does my skin end and where does the air begin? You could be like, well, I can look and I can see it. No, it's just an approximation. You understand that, right? That what you're looking at when I say, yeah, that's air clearly, and this is my hand, right? But what about skin cells? A little gross, but what about skin cells? I mean, how far, at what point are they no longer part of my body? I'm trying to get at is that in nature, the lines between things are pretty blurry. Okay? What is the point at which the ground begins and the air, right? Also, by the way, you realize that my skin is breathing, right? All of our skin does a certain amount of there's drying out going on, right? So there is literally we can't see it, but there's literally like a moisture transfer that's going on between my hand and the air. Well, now the moisture's in my hand, and now the moisture's in the air in Utah, right? Because the air is dry. See what I'm getting at, right? That moisture is part of my hand, but it's leaving my hand. When is it no longer part of my hand? At some point, we would agree. You can't tell me the point. That's the problem, because it's continuous. There's an infinitely small point where where we might just decide, but it's arbitrary, okay? All right. But in general, we just kind of go, whatever I can get inside of a glove, I'll call my hand, and everything on the outside, I'll call the air, but it's an approximation, okay? Digital and discrete are always approximations, okay? Do you see the earnestness with which I'm telling you this? They are always approximations, okay? To the extent we can bucketize things, right? It's less so. So for example, though, right, we can at least, if we were all in the classroom together, we could be like, okay, right, there's student one, student two, and we could count the students. We'd say this many people, right? What if somebody, doesn't have a leg for whatever reason, right? Born that way, you know, injured in war, right? Are they still a whole person? Where's the point? It gets really sort of surreal, right? Like, where's the point where they stop being a person? What? Then you get down to it. Again, it's all an approximation. What about conjoined twins, right? Two people. What's the criterion? Physical separation? Not. In some instances, no, but we would maybe still call them two people. Why? Two brains? Okay, but you know what I'm trying to say. The lines are fuzzy. The lines are fuzzy. We discretize things in order to make sense of them. We say it's 1223 because it makes sense that way. And if we have like the old classic wristwatch that has the second hand, we never said, by the way, in the days back when that was the only thing we had, we never said if somebody said, "Hey, what time it is? What time is it? What time it is?" Well, if you said, "What time is it?" and somebody was like, 12:23, you'd think they were like an a-hole. I mean, it'd be like, "Wow, that's a little pedantic, little pedantic prick," or whatever. You'd really be. It was off-putting. Like, what are you doing? Because really all you needed to know was 10 till, 5 till, quarter till, you know, yeah, it's about half past. Everything was an approximation, discretized to a bucket that made sense given what you were looking at. You'd glance at it, you'd see it over here, and you'd be like, oh, it's like 5 till, 5:10, or even like 5 or 10 till, because you'd have to look at it. And it was too much work to try to count the things. Then, these things showed up with whatever, digital, what we called digital watches. They were called digital not because they had electricity, okay? But because the readout told you something false that was bucketized, that was approximate, and was useful, like 1223. And all it really meant is you were in a window between this instant in time and that instant in time. I bucketize it. I call it 1223, but it's not actually 1223. Is everybody getting that? I call it 1223, but it's not 1223. It's actually 1223 and 7 point very long number seconds during that instant, and then of course rapidly changing. Okay. Let me just see. Let me see. Backing up. Blah, 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 blah. Let me see. I'm wading my way through the matrix. Hold on a second. Some of this is just kind of cool, philosophical, whatever. We got the Matrix, we got the Truman Show. Yeah. Legless people are people too. I totally agree. Let me see. People with red hair. It's a great question. I have gingers in my family, and my beard used to be red. So I think that makes me part of the person. Okay, so Cody, yeah, maybe you can clarify the question. What about I have how is that not concrete? So I didn't say anything about unless you were referring to somebody else, a student. I never said anything about concreteness. I don't think I did. It's possible that I said the word, but I don't think so. But it's not like soft versus hard, soft versus concrete. Um, so, all right. Okay. I'm going to keep moving. But yeah, and somebody asked if that was kind of bingo time. Sort of. We're going there. We're going to do a little more bingo here. Okay. Um, okay, that's really good. Who dropped that on there? Braden? Yeah, that's fantastic. Perfect meme. You know? Yeah. That's apparently that's how old the baby is, right? That's pretty good. Okay. So what we do in the world is we build systems and we build concepts that are more discrete, right? Like, for example, this is my house, this is my yard. Hey, you kids, get off my lawn, right? Well, when does your lawn end and the neighbor's lawn begin? That line in reality maybe has a precise definition, but even that is it's not going to be precise. There's some moment we discretize it, which means we make it discrete. Discrete has to do with um, a clean line and a separability. Okay, that's the idea. So, and another example of that is voltage, which is analog. I got Bryce. I got a hot mic still on you, or again, I don't know, somehow, somewhere. Voltage is analog, right? The actual power in a wire is moving. It's not like, oh, it's not exactly one thing, it's moving. But we just kind of build circuitry that's like, when it gets above this, we just call it on, and when it's below that, we just call it off. And we're going to talk more about that. Okay? All right. This is an example. This guy, I don't know who this guy is. Obviously, an athlete. I can tell a couple ways. One, he looks like one. He's got built better than me, and he is jumping and whacking the little tiles. That's how I can. That's actually the biggest. Well, now somebody could jump and whack the tiles and not be an athlete. Um, but what they do when they are testing an athlete for athletic ability, one of the things you want to know is vertical leap, right? Um, and height would be a similar idea. But when I was 25, so I'm 6'2", approximately. When I was 25, I had like a 36-inch vertical leap. Believe it or not, I could jam a regulation basketball at 6'2", which is doing pretty good. That's pretty, not too bad. Today, I have a 3.6-inch vertical leap. Um, and, and I've not been called up from the minor leagues yet. Okay, what's this guy's vertical leap? Here's what they do on these little I don't even, I honestly, I don't even know if there's like an official name for this thing. But what you can see is that they have these horizontal little plastic tiles, and they're on a pivot, right? They're on a rod. And what you do is, because I mean, when you're trying to measure a vertical leap, at the end of the day, they get you to like stretch out and see how high your reach is, right? Max out your reach when you're just standing there. Now the question is the difference between that highest reach and what I can whack is going to be my vertical leap, right? That's how far my body got off the ground. Another way to do that would be to set up some like lasers, on the ground that would measure, where his feet left. You know what I mean? You could do that where you'd have like some sensor on the other side, right? You measure it from the feet up. But here's the thing: if I have that set of lasers, the accuracy is dependent upon the number of lasers that I've got. Does that make sense? So if I've got like, 10 lasers, 20, whatever, however many lasers, 10 lasers, I'm an idiot. There'd have to be like hundreds of lasers, right? But if I had 100 lasers, my granularity with which I could measure his vertical leap would be the distance between any two lasers. But you'd be in that bucket. I still wouldn't know exactly, right? I would not know precisely. Here's another example. When runners, it's a race or horse race, you see this. They used to call it uh, a dead heat, or they'd say, the horse wins by a nose, right? Which means look at or a photo finish. They'd have a camera even in the old days, they'd have a camera on the finish line, and then something that would trigger the camera. I don't know enough about it, right? And at that moment, if you saw the two horses' noses, and as far as you could tell by the human eye, they were identical, it would be a draw, right? They would tie. Now today we have laser-based stopwatches and things that are very finely triggered, and we measure to 100th of a second. But if two runners, whatever, running some sprint, and they cross the finish line, and the timing for each of them is the exact same, whatever, right? 20.07, and that's both of their time. I think they tie. But the reality is that one of them crossed before the other. They did not cross at the same time. But the discretization meaning to make discrete, we decided we would create buckets of 100th of a second each and see how many of those buckets it took you to get across the finish line. And we said you were 20.07 seconds. It's a new world record. Okay, this guy. What you do with this thing is there's a height measurement on these. And when he's jumping up, and I think that if I'm not mistaken, the gap between each of these little plastic units is a half an inch. Pretty sure that's correct, right? So in other words, he's going to jump up and he's going to smack the things, and whichever ones move, then he gets credit for that bucket. So let's just say he's as studly as I was when I was 25, and he's got a 36-inch vertical leap. Okay, the reality is all that means is he flicked the little peg that was the one that gave him credit for 36 inches, but he didn't do the one that said 36 and a half. And there might be 10 other guys that go right after him, and they all are 36, but the reality is they're all slightly different, but they're all in the 36 bucket. Is this making sense? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Okay, here's another example. Let me give you another example of this idea. Here is a video. I don't know that there's going to be, I think that I'll hear the audio, and I think that YouTube will hear the audio, and I think that you will not, but it doesn't matter. It's just dumb music or whatever anyway. Okay. Oh, I want you to just look at what this guy's done. Let me see. Just going to drop that down. Okay, see what the guy's doing? He is making a picture of Abraham Lincoln using Lincoln head pennies. Okay. Now, what has he done? How did he do it? What do you perceive? There's a couple of spots. Let me try to pause it at a certain point. Do you see these cups over here? Cups carrying pennies? But there's another spot where you can see. Okay, there he's got the picture. You can see that better. Okay, now, oh shoot, what happened? What happened is me being not good. Hold on. Yeah, okay, you see more cups over there on the right. Anyway, there's a couple of spots where you can see more and more where he's got the cups. okay, because the cups are central to the methodology. All right, no, don't go away. Freeze right there. Okay. Let me get a more, there we go, a little bright. Okay, check it out. Now, from where you're sitting, yeah, I don't know if he's using heads or tails. I'm sorry, I'm just checking some of the other comments. Okay, yeah, Brian asked, so comes things like fingers, I have 10 of them, right? I don't understand how that would be argued different. No, this is the point. The whole point, Brian, is it can be argued differently. For example, what if you're somebody that, just whatever, you've got this going down, right? Is that stub still a finger? There are definitional issues. The real question is not in, under normal circumstances. Well, the other thing is under normal circumstances where, standard human genetics dictates 10 fingers, right? Um, Point just being, there are definitional ways of looking and exploring space around certain things. Um, but that's not super crazy because we get it, we get the concept. But the notion of where a finger ends, and another finger begins, for example, the notion at which my hand ends and the air begins, the point just being that there are things that line up kind of nicely for discretization, and they are by their nature sort of discrete. Christmas lights, I think, is a really good example. There are 100 bulbs, there are 100, there's wire, you know what I mean? It's kind of a man-made object, right? Um, and so if there are 100 Christmas lights on your house, that would be potentially both analog and digital. It's analog from a power perspective, right? Because the power running through there, it takes 110 volts, but a little more than that is okay, and a little less than that's okay, and the voltage is actually moving. That's why we have surge protectors that we plug our stuff into, okay? Because the voltage is not stable. It's discrete in the sense that I can look at it and I can count 100 bulbs, right? And I could say it's 100 bulbs on the Christmas light. Or it's one string of lights because, you know what I mean? It's got a plug on this side and the little receiving plug on the other side. So there are ways of looking at almost anything and viewing it continuously and viewing it discretely. Okay? And that's why clean kind of boring answers usually don't tell the tale. Okay. Let me see. And also, the other thing is where the struggle usually comes in is in the fringes, in the margins, you know. Frodo after Return of the King, exactly. No, so right. So Matthew said, yes, I'm going to heart Matthew's comment. Matthew said, I think the idea behind discreteness is that you define rules that give you, this is actually beautiful, Matthew. You define rules that give an approximation in order to better understand it or in order to better use it, manipulate it, manage it, right? So, right, how many fingers do you have?
It's
10.
like with
It's close
people.
to, what's that?
It's like with people. We discretize each other or something.
No, I think we do. Right, right. No, I think we do. Right. We categorize each other for
Yeah.
convenience. Right.
And to control others and stuff, right?
Well, whether independent of control, I don't know that it's necessarily about control. It might be, could be.
No, but it's like society has a discretized idea of people, right? And so
Oh, I
we
think so
discretize
too. Yeah.
person.
And society being essentially the sum of all the people in it, because I think it's innate within people to discretize other people. I think it's innate in humanity. You know what I mean? I don't think it's
Which
like,
is dumb.
because the problem is, managing all the subtlety that's what's really going on is cognitive. It can be a cognitive overload. I'm not justifying, I'm not justifying all discretizations, right? But it is are you a student? Uh, you know what I mean? Well, I don't know. I took last semester off. Am I still a student? You know what I'm trying to say. Well, I'm a college student. I'm a citizen of Utah, whatever, right? Um, so there is in fact, funky gradations all around all kinds of buckets. So I think that's actually, I think Eddie, that's a really good. I think it's a great observation. So looking back at Lincoln, and I think it also makes the case, right? That you look at me and you're like, old man, whatever, right? You can put me in a bucket, whatever that bucket happens to be. White-haired people, salud. Guilty as charged. I've been this way since I was like 40. Okay, Lincoln. Here's what happens. First of all, this guy had like 16 cups, 16 paper cups or whatever, okay? And what he did first was he took a bunch of Lincoln head pennies and he sorted them by tone, right? From brightness to darkness, right? You have to get much more tarnished, right? Tarnished pennies are darker, and brand new pennies are got that copper look, right? So you can kind of see, right, how over here on the outside are some of the bright ones, and then you get down here and you get some of the dark ones, right? So that's the first thing he did. Now, if he had 16 pennies, that means he had a monochrome system with 16 monochrome shades of gray, if you want to look at it that way. Monochrome to copper, so it goes from bright copperish to more, dark brownish. I don't even know what the color of tarnished copper really is. What we call it, but it's brownish anyway. Um, then the next thing he did, if you look back to his cheat sheet, see the cheat sheet he's got going on? And what he's doing there with the post-it notes is the cheat sheet is line by line. He has taken a photograph of Abraham Lincoln, and what he's basically done is said, okay, this little, I don't know how big those are. They're pretty small. If I were dude, I would have had a larger picture of Lincoln to to work from, but I'm old and I have reading glasses, so that just like makes me go, nah, man, I'd have a bigger picture of Lincoln. But what he's done is basically like drawn a line, right? And then essentially grid. And then he's looked at every single box and made a value judgment about the aggregate, the average color within that square. Okay. This is what your scanner does. This is what color scanners do, black and white scanners. Okay. This is all they do, except it's really, really tiny. Okay. But he could have done this thing with 4 pennies, 6, right? Or whatever, maybe 12, 3 by 4, right? He could have done with like 12 pennies, and at a large enough distance, your brain might have recognized it. That's probably not true, right? There's a certain granularity where your brain kicks in and wants to do the pattern matching, right? So from your resolution right now, right, you can clearly tell that's Lincoln, right? There's not any question that that's Abraham Lincoln, right? Um, and let me see. Sorry, I keep falling behind. Blah blah blah. I'm going to come back to these. But what he's done is, and what happens electronically when you're doing scanning is you'll look at the colors of a certain picture, right? Or the either the colors or the black and white or the grayscale, and you'll come up with a single number that represents that one spot, and then you'll drop that color. That's why we call things, like when things look pixelated, when you look at a picture and it's not super smooth and you can see little, like, you know what I mean? You can see little like horizontal and vertical ridges and stuff. That's pixelization, because when it was scanned, it wasn't scanned at a high enough resolution, or it was saved at a lower resolution so that you lose information by discretizing it. So you gain, when you discretize, and this really kind of relates to Eddie's comment, which I really, really like about people. When you discretize, you lose information but you gain confidence. Now, this is more of a topic for 305G, computers and society, okay? But I think it's quite interesting, actually, when you think about the fact that you lose information, but you gain sort of definiteness, right? Because I don't have to deal with as much information. And in a practical sense, my JPEG file gets smaller. You know, I mean, the size of the file. The image might stay the same size on the page, but the actual size in memory. Okay. All right, we're kind of like out, but that's Lincoln, and I want to just. This is actually the last slide on analog versus digital. Quick discussion. I was. Let's see. I told you about how I had all this vertigo crap, right? Right after New Year's, which I'm almost done with. I think it gets halfway better every day, so I'm trapped in an infinite series, but you know. Anyway, this was a clock on the wall in the emergency room when I was in there around, first week of January. This is actually, the funny thing is, if you look at the picture, that's actually me. Those are my hands. That's my phone. That's me with my UVU mask on. And this is my green hospital garb. So that's actually me, my reflection. But I looked at that and I was like, okay, I got to use this because even when the room's spinning at 40 miles an hour, I'm still thinking about you guys. So is that a digital clock or is it an analog clock?
Digital.
Okay, we got one vote for digital. Why is it digital?
Because what's powering it is like digital information and like it looks analog, it looks like a layout of analog, but it also has discretized numbers. It doesn't have little notches, and I don't think that it moves like an analog clock.
Ooh,
You
I think
know,
you. Okay, I like where you're going, Eddie, and I think that so this is an interesting thing. There really are a couple ways to look at this. What any other comments, by the way, too? I don't want to. I like where you went, but anybody else?
So, what I would look at it as a analog clock on a digital display, basically.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, what else?
I would say it's technically digital because there are discrete positions that it occupies, like at any given time, that aren't like one continuous. Like you could divide every position it could potentially occupy into specific points, as
Yeah,
opposed to an analog clock, which you couldn't.
I would say digital just because of the pixels, because because the pixels itself are discrete, whereas with a true analog clock that you see in person, there's not specific pixels that you see.
these are great thoughts, brother. Let me give you my sense because this is a really good example of where the gray zones settle in. Right. This is also why if you say I'm going to ask you this question in the homework and on the exams, more bingo. Give me an example of a digital system, and if you go a digital clock, that is worth 0 points. Okay, that is zero. It's like you. First of all, I already said it was digital. You said digital. You don't get any credit for repeating the question, and then you just added clock. So it'd be like, give me an example of a digital system. A digital dog. Like, no, zero. Okay, here's my sense of it. I think it is clearly mimicking an analog display in the sense that when I look at it, now that's kind of convenient because that well, no, the I know that it's eight. Uh, I can't actually tell which one's the second hand, which one's the minute hand. I think the second hand's on the eight because it's longer. The minute hand, so it's like 8:20, 28. No, what is I'm man? How long has it been? No, it's 8:28, right? But
the
the
minute hand is longer than the hour hand.
yeah,
In an
but
analog.
what about minute and second? I thought second hand's longer than minute, right?
Oh, well, it looks like the hour hand is on the 4 and the minute is on the 8.
Oh, I thought this guy here, the fatty here, was on the 8, and that was the hour hand.
I have no idea. In the analog clocks that I've seen, the longer one is the minute and the shorter one is the hour. I could
Yeah,
also
there's 3. That's the thing. There's hour, minutes, and seconds.
Are there 3 there?
I think
in
there's
this?
3 there. So it might be a
Well,
bad
let's
example.
pretend there aren't, because this is hard enough to read the numbers.
Yeah, well, it's right. So the analog element of the whole thing is that when I look at this, that guy, imagine that guy was the second hand, right? At this moment, or I think that's actually the second hand on the 8. Right at that moment, I don't know if it's like 8, 8.5, you know what I mean? If that is the second hand, that's extendo here, right? I mean, I don't have a clear answer when I look at it, and in that respect, it's analog, right? Because I have to create my own bucketization to say, if that is the minute hand, then, or I don't even know, right? Like all of a sudden I'm sitting here like I'm losing my mind about reading a freaking analog clock because nothing's moving and I haven't looked at one for 20 years. And we're out of time, but what I want to say is, in the sense that I have to bucketize when I look at it and make my own value judgment, like it's 820, right? Then, then in that respect, it's analog. Now, somebody made the comment that as these things are moving, since that is clearly a digital display, right? It is clearly a digital display being run by analog power coming in, but through some kind of clearly digital circuitry and a digital display to literally take the minute hand and like draw it, erase it, redraw it, erase it, redraw it. So internally, these are all discrete positions, right? There's no sweep second hand, but on like a Swiss watch that you have to wind up and it's run by springs, as the spring unwinds and the gears start moving, that second hand is sweeping. And it is never like, as opposed to click, click, right? You see a second hand that like goes click, 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 and actually moves in like certain positions. That's discrete positions. But a sweep second hand always is continuously moving, continuous. And underneath, I'm quite confident underneath that, because it looks like a digital system, and I'm quite confident that it is, that underneath the actual time is being counted by a clock tick inside a processor and stored in memory, like this many ticks since we turned it on or whatever. So the answer is kind of both. But what I'm trying to get you to think about is, what is it that makes it digital? And the reason, Eddie, that I got excited when you said, something about the way it displays it,
It doesn't move like an analog clock.
Right, that it looks and displays like an analog clock. So it's clearly, to me, a digital clock in its function, analog in its presentation, which is almost like the worst of both worlds, because I have this imprecise, discrete, digitized idea of time. Then I mask information by pretending that it's analog and give it to the user, where the user then has to approximate and extrapolate back and lose information. To me, it's the worst of both worlds. Okay, now here's where we are going to hit next, and we didn't finish. It's not unusual for me to not finish. We're going to talk about abstraction next, which is more bingo, but we will absolutely finish this Thursday. So Friday, Saturday night, Saturday night, we will show as the due date for homework 1, module 1, exam 1, after which they'll turn to zeros on Canvas, but you can always do them. You can still do them, okay? The deadline is just to remind you that it went to a 0 and you better get off your butt and get after it. That's it. Okay, that's all I got. I went over. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. This is fun, but I know some of you have class, like right now at 1, so I do apologize for that. Okay. Yeah, Trent, I am doing better every day. Every day's better. Every day's better. Just still a little tiny bit woozy, tiny bit. So, okay. Later, everybody. me see. And while I'm shutting stuff down, I usually stay on the audio. If anybody just has any like lingering questions on Discord, you know what I mean? Just don't hesitate. I got to do little shutdown stuff, in between.